And that's why you should never tickle a hamster while it's underwater. So this is Wednesday, September 12th, and we're going to get in. Oh, by the way, this is advanced class, so if you're in my regular class, don't watch this video. It'll blow your hair back. So I do 2 different videos, one for regular, one for advanced. We're doing 2 different stories. Regular kids, you don't want to do this because this is learning you're not ready for. And my advanced kids, if you're going like Lucas, welcome to death. Not just your death, but in the story. And so, Magic Linen, there is a story called The Black Cat, which you can get on my website called that thing. Magic Linens, the green sheet, still doing less than a week. I'm going to keep haunting you and telling you about it. The book report book you're going to bring on Friday. You should be halfway through it by this weekend. And we started our 7-element thing. The notes that you have in front of you that Kim has volunteered to have me grab. This thing, we're now going to do this part down here to help you out with a thing. In a moment, Kim, I'm still ignoring you. So on the short story notes at the bottom, we're going to do one part of it, and we're going to finish out the rest of it next week, because you get to use this to cheat on future quizzes and tests and make your life easier. Foreshadowing is going to be very important with us in this story, because for some of you, it's going to help lessen the anxiety, because you're going to see what's coming because of foreshadowing. For others of you, it's going to heighten the anxiety, because you're going to see what's coming because of foreshadowing. Mr. Brovicast, what is foreshadowing? Solid question. So, what is foreshadowing? Robinson?
It's pretty much a hint to the future. Like when the bad guys, like if someone said, like someone's pulling a prank, a bomb, but it's actually a thing
something
of
else.
Oozy cheese, and they say it's going to be delicious or something like that.
So clues to help you figure out the ending. In this one, we have a definite ending. It's just the foreshadowing is going to help you see what's coming. In my regular class, they're reading a story that was like The Lady and the Tiger that just stops in the middle with no ending. And the only way to figure out how it ends is by using the foreshadowing clues. And then there's a very definite ending. You're like, oh my God! And so they have a whole different way they get to do theirs. But for you guys, we have an ending. It's just helping you prepare for that ending as it arrives. Griff?
What's the ending of your story?
I can't tell you, because they don't know yet.
The ending.
So I've not given them the end of their story because I don't trust them not to read ahead. Just like I don't trust Sharp to read ahead, or I try, So if you guys have issues reading ahead, I start chopping off the end of your stories and not giving them to you. Yeah. So here's where we get to find out how much trust I give you, because you guys, if you start cheating and learning on your own, this is school, no place for learning. You have to just sort of figure out as we go along with it. Kimps!
Okay, so this is not even about this, but for the green sheet, do I have to transfer all my answers to the
Yes.
green? Oh.
I know, it's awful. Luckily, there's only like so many on there. It's not super long. Hall!
So foreshadowing could be like, if, let's say in the Lady and the Tiger story, she was like, at one point he made her mad and she like had the thought to like hurt him in some sort. That could be foreshadowing that she kills him.
Yes, that could be foreshadowing. That'd been great if that actually been in there at some point, where she just kept meowing at him randomly. That would have been foreshadowing also, in that direction. John!
Is the cute cat in the middle supposed to prepare us for
This, I just put rain, because for some of you, you're going to focus on this one. Others of you, you're going to focus on this one. So you get to choose which one you think you want to go with. My last one, then I'm ignoring the rest of you. Yes?
Yay. So in the story that we're reading out loud,
Yeah.
There's foreshadowing in it. There's a lot of.
Oh, yeah, I agree. The Black Cat. On this one, there's a whole lot of what's called exposition here at the beginning, which, as you'll see, is on your notes, but I don't officially teach you exposition until next week. Do you guys know what exposition is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pre-explanation.
Yeah, it's the boring beginning parts. This one does have the boring beginning parts, but it turns out to be important boring beginning parts. So as we get into it, you're going to figure out point of view, main character, and then like what's happening and stuff like that. And then don't worry, we're going to get into rising action pretty quickly. The Black Cat. For the most wild yet most unpleasant story which I am about to write, I neither expect nor ask for belief. Crazy indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet insane I am not. It's in that back corner over there, you see that thing? It was just sitting there. And I am not, and very surely did I not dream it. But tomorrow I will die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world plainly, concisely, and without comment a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me. Yet I will not attempt to explain them. To me, they have presented little but horror. To many, they will seem less terrible than elaborate. Hereafter, perhaps, someone who is intelligent may be found which will reduce my unbelievable experience into a more commonplace one. Some person more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than I am, which will identify, in the circumstances I detail with awe, nothing more than an ordinary series of very natural causes and effects. Mr. Brovicast, that was a lot of words. I agree. So break it down. What point of view is it being told in? How do we know?
Because he's
What's the main character's name?
Edgar Allan Poe.
No.
We don't have it.
We don't know. It's not Edgar Allan Poe because that's the author, which is different. So we don't know the main character's name because it's being told first person. He's just talking directly to us. But he did tell us something's going to happen to him tomorrow. What happens to him tomorrow? He is going to die. Why is he going to die? Yeah, we don't know. It just says there's a whole bunch of crazy things that happen to me that's going to cause me to die tomorrow. For you, it might seem like a normal logical sequence of events, but to me, it seems like a crazy thing that's going to occur. What's going to occur? That's where our foreshadowing is going to come in, and you're going to figure out from all the clues that are going to get dropped. Now he's going to give us some background. We're going to do little flashbacky bits. So we're going to flashback. He's going to tell you about his childhood, which is going to lead into what's happening now. Since I was a baby, I was noted for the happiness and humanity of my personality. My tenderness of heart was even so obvious as to make me the butt of my friends' jokes. I was especially fond of animals and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. Excuse me. With these, I spent most of my time and never was so happy as when feeding and petting them. This oddity of character grew with my growth, and, in my adulthood, I derived from it one of my major sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished affection for a faithful and friendly dog, I need hardly to be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the satisfaction I had. There is something in the unselfish and self-sacrificing love of a canine which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent occasion to test the measly friendship and delicate loyalty of a mere human. To sum that up, what is this guy's personality? Nice and likes animals. So with Poe, if you've not done him before, I'm guessing most of you have, he uses a whole lot of big fancy words and throws them at you, and you're like, and you can usually sum up an entire paragraph in like a sentence. The whole thing just says, I love puppies, and I'm a nice person. So keep that in mind. I married early in my life, and was happy to find in my wife an attitude not unlike my own. Observing my soft spot for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of purchasing those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. The cat, by the way, and that whole thing, what does he do? Well, one, he has a lot of animals, and he gets married. Plays a big role coming up. Married, his wife is just like him, and they get a whole bunch of pets. And then the also part where he gets irritated because he stops calling on kids because he has to get a whole bunch of information. The cat was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black, and friendly to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little touched with superstition, made frequent references to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mention the matter at all for no better reason than it happens just now to be remembered. That's not why he mentions it. What was that word I taught you earlier? There's a reason why he brings it up. Is the cat a witch? No, but it's going to play a role in things coming up with a whole weird things happening stuff. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he followed me wherever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general attitude and character, through the effects of alcohol, had, I blush to confess it, experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew, day by day, more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use harsh language to my wife. At length, I even attacked her with personal violence. Now we have a change. One, we know the cat's name, which is?
Pluto!
Now also what's happened to our guy?
He goes crazy!
He started drinking, and what kind of drunk is he?
Evil.
And so some people are happy, friendly, kind of drunks. He's more like a rawr, 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 rawr kind of drunk. And so he has now gone, apparently he started drinking and making poor choices. John?
Is this gonna turn out like Cujo?
Find out. That's what it's called, reading. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my personality. I not only neglected, but abused them. For Pluto, however, I still retained enough thought to restrain me from mistreating him, as I made no hesitation of mistreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when by accident or through their affection they got in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length, even Pluto, who is now becoming old, and consequently somewhat bad-tempered, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my bad temper. So not only when he's upset and he's been drinking is he mean to his wife, but who else is he mean to? The pets. And for the longest time, he was not mean to his cat, because the cat was his favorite. But he said even after a while, alcohol has made him make poor choices. Speaking of poor choices, one night, returning home, quite intoxicated from one of my haunts about town, I thought that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him when in his fright at my sudden attack, he inflicted a small wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a more than cruel wickedness, alcohol nurtured, filled every fiber of my body. I took from my waistcoat pocket a small knife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush, I burn, and I shudder while I pen this horrific crime. When my reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the effects of the night's sins, I experienced an emotion, half of horror, half of remorse, for the crime of which I had been guilty. But it was, at best, a weak and vague feeling, and my soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excessive drinking, and soon drowned in wine all memory of the frightening deed. So poor choices have been made. He comes home drunk. What poor choice does he make? But he had a good reason. And what was his good reason? The cat bit him. And why did the cat bite him?
Because he attacked it.
Yeah, because he was a jerk and grabbed it. Because the cat was avoiding him because he was drunk. He's like, come here, kitty! And then grabbed the cat. And the cat was like, rah! And then bit him. And then he was like, twink! And then went for the cat's eye. But does he at least feel guilty about it?
Yeah.
Yes, for like 20 minutes. And then he was like, done. And he goes right back to drinking again. Mr. Brovicast, is the story over? Oh no, it's just beginning. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature who had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation, and then came the spirit of unreasonableness. I'm not any more sure that my soul lives than I am that unreasonableness is one of the basic impulses of the human heart. Who has not 100 times found himself committing an evil or a silly action for no other reason than because he knows he should not do it? Have we not an unconscious need, despite our best judgment, to violate that which is the law, merely because we know it to be wrong? This spirit of unreasonableness, I say, came to my final overthrow. To pause real quick. That was a whole bunch of words throwing at you, but I think it applies to you guys. He's saying the fact that it's part of human nature to do things wrong. That when you know you're not supposed to do a thing, you do it anyway. When your parents say, don't sneak out of the house, you're going to get grounded, you're like, challenge accepted! And you go ahead and do it anyway. When you know that when you're supposed to stand and you sit down or bad things are going to happen to you, you're like, challenge accepted! And so it's that need that even though you know you shouldn't do a thing, you do it anyway. He says that's what drives this next thing he does. He knows he's not supposed to do this bad thing, but sometimes the desire to be bad is hard to fight. It was this deep longing of the soul to anger itself, to offer violence against itself, to do wrong for the wrong's sake only, that urged me to continue and finally to complete the injury I had inflicted upon the innocent beast. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose around its neck and hung it from the limb of a tree. Hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with remorse in my heart. Hung it because I knew that it had loved me, because I felt that it had given me no reason or wrongdoing. Hung it because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. So he's made a second poor choice. If you're unsure of what a noose is, that's what the noose is. So what has he done to the poor kitty? He hangs the cat. But for good reason. And why does he hang the cat?
She's crazy!
Because he knows it. Because the cat keeps looking at him with the one eye. And so he eventually feels bad. He has guilt. He's like, we're going to solve the guilt. So he decides to just go ahead and hang the cat, solving the problem, while at the same time feeling really bad. I know, it's just awful.
No, just stop it.
Awful.
When you hang someone by it's kind of like a little longer, so I think we'll go nicer. I know this is like isn't much right. If you just take a gun and shot him, because if you do that, it's like relieves the pain, and that just happens way more quickly than when they do it.
Yeah, I don't think he was trying to relieve pain. He was,
That's just mean.
well, yeah. As he says, sometimes people do a thing they know they're not supposed to just to do that thing. Once again, our story's not over. It's just beginning. That's the intro to it.
I've already started crying.
I know, just it gets better.
What? Better?
No,
It-
that's not better.
I will tell you,
It
gets better. As in not like awful, but better. Not awful, but better. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the inferno. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself from then on to despair. So what happened to his house? The same night that he kills the cat, he goes to bed, and his house burns to the ground.
The foreshadowing.
I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the crime. In other words, in his saying, he's like, there's no connection. It just happened to be bad luck that house burnt down same day that I hung the cat. It just happens. I'm simply detailing a chain of facts, and I wish not to leave even the most possible link imperfect. On the day after the fire, I visited the ruins of my house. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found with a closet wall, not very thick. Sorry, here you go. Not very thick, which stood about in the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plaster had resisted the destruction of the fire, a fact which I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall, a dense crowd of people was collected, and many of them seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with very eager attention. The words strange and extraordinary and other similar expressions grabbed my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if imprinted upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat.
What?
The impression was done with an accuracy that was truly marvelous. There was even a rope about the animal's neck. So he shows up to his house the next day. Whole house is burnt to the ground. Nothing there except for one wall. the one wall where his bed was. And what does he see against the wall?
A cat.
Not a cat, but
The
the imprint, like the outline of a cat with a noose around its neck against the wall where he had been sleeping, smashed against it. And a whole crowd of people around it staring at it going, well, that's kind of weird. But don't worry, he has a perfectly normal explanation for how this occurred. Well, when I beheld this ghostly sign, for I could scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror were extreme. The cat, I finally remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd of people, and someone must have cut the animal from the tree and thrown it through an open window into my bedroom. This had probably been done with the idea of waking me from sleep. The falling of other walls had smashed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the chemicals of which the flames and the ammonia from the carcass had then accomplished the image as I saw it. Perfectly reasonable explanation. His thought is, how did the imprint get there?
He's crazy.
Obviously, someone walking by saw the house on fire and was like, oh my God, I have to wake the people up. Thank God, there's a hanging cat. And they took the hanging cat, like, woo, 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 and then threw it through the window, thinking that throwing a hanging cat through a window would wake the people up. The cat smacked the wall, house burnt down, cat evaporated, leaving nothing but an outline on the wall of the entire thing. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. And that's his explanation for why there's a thing, because that's how I wake up people when their house is burning down.
Oh my gosh.
Don't worry, it gets better. Although I had found a logical explanation for what I had seen, it did not fail to make a deep impression upon my imagination. For months, I could not rid myself of the specter of the cat. And during this period, there came back into my soul a half feeling that seemed close to, but was not quite, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me among the dreadful places which I now frequently visited for another pet of the same species, and of somewhat similar appearance with which to replace it. So what's he trying to find? A new black cat, because he's begun to miss the first one. One night, as I sat, half stupefied, in a local bar, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object, resting upon the head of one of the immense barrels of gin, or rum, which was the main furniture of the place. I've been looking steadily at the top of this barrel for some time, and what now surprised me was the fact that I had not sooner noticed the object there. I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, nearly as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every aspect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any part of his body, but this cat had a large splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of his chest. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my attention. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I at once offered to purchase it off the bartender, but he made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never even seen it before. I continued to pet it, but when I prepared to go home, the animal seemed to want to follow me. I allowed it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I went. When it reached the house, it made itself quite comfortable at once, and immediately became a great favorite with my wife. So what has he found? A new cat. The one difference being? Pay attention to white spot. That's going to play a role. For my own part, I soon found, remember he just brought it home, loves new cat. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. He has issues. This was just the opposite of what I had anticipated, but I know not how or why it was, I became disgusted by his evident fondness of me. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame and remembrance of my former deed of cruelty, preventing me from physically abusing it. I did not, for some weeks, strike or otherwise violently abuse it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unimaginable loathing, and to flee silently from its revolting presence as from the breath of a plague. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery, on the morning after I brought it home, that, like Pluto, it also had lost one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife, who possessed that feeling towards animals which had once been my distinguishing trait, and the source of many of my simplest and purest pleasures. With my hatred for this cat, however, its attraction towards me seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with an insistence that would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair, or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome purring. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly trip me up, or, fastening its long and sharp claws in my clothes, climb in this manner to my chest. At such times, although I wanted to destroy it with a single blow, I was still stopped from doing so, partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, by my absolute fright of the beast. So, new cat, what is similar between the two? Your homework is the worst homework I've given you yet this year. Put the story away and do not touch it till tomorrow. Do not finish the story until we get a chance to do it together.